Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you into a deeper place today, not just a moment of information, but a revelation that will shake how you see the spiritual realm and your place in it. There's a color which is love. They're drawn to it, they work with it, they invoke it. They use it to disguise, manipulate, attract, distract, and destroy. And many people unknowingly put it on like fashion, thinking it's harmless, stylish beauty, full even powerful. But in the spirit realm, nothing is neutral. Every color, sound, word, and action has meaning. Everything is either working for the kingdom of light or the kingdom of darkness. Now, before I tell you why witches love when you wear this color, I want to remind you that in the spiritual world, symbolism is law. What you think is fabric, Satan sees as a flag. What you wear, you announce. What you carry, you activate. What you don't know can kill you, so don't be casual about spiritual matters. Casual people become casualties. The color I'm talking about is black. Now hear me clearly. This is not about race, ethnicity, or your personal fashion preferences. This is about how the kingdom of darkness uses the symbolism of black to communicate and operate. Witches love when you wear black, not because the color is evil in itself, but because of what it represents in their world, how it functions in rituals, and what doors it opens when worn in ignorance. Let's unpack this. In the realm of the spirit, nothing is ever just what it seems. What is seen in the natural carries unseen weight in the supernatural. And when it comes to colors, especially black, most people are unaware of how deep the symbolism goes. You think you're just wearing an outfit, but in the eyes of the spirit world, you are putting on a mantle, a message, a manifestation. Black, in particular, carries a weight of meaning that transcends the material. It has been used across cultures and generations to represent things hidden, veiled, and shrouded. In the spiritual realm, black is not just a color. It is a cloak. It is a signal. It is a covering that conceals more than it reveals. And witches know it. That is why they love when you wear it, because it plays right into their world of concealment and mystique. Understand that witches do not thrive in light. They do not operate openly. Their power comes from what is hidden. They dwell in shadows, in secrets, in the unexplained and the unexposed. Their entire craft is rooted in darkness, not just literal darkness, but spiritual, emotional, and symbolic darkness. So when they see someone consistently wearing black, especially with no awareness of its spiritual implications, they do not just see fabric. They see an opportunity. They see someone who is cloaked, perhaps unintentionally, but cloaked nonetheless in an energy that aligns with the unseen. And they love it because the person has unknowingly come into agreement with a posture of hiding. You might say, but I just like the color. That's understandable from a natural point of view, but from the supernatural dimension, what you like doesn't always exempt you from consequence. Intent doesn't cancel impact. In spiritual matters, ignorance is no excuse. When you wear black constantly, especially without discernment, you may not feel it, but your spirit does. You are covering yourself in a symbolic darkness, and over time, that darkness becomes atmosphere. Your emotional state begins to reflect the shade of your garments. You become more introverted, more withdrawn, more concealed, even from God's presence. You pray less, you speak less, you feel less. It's subtle. It's slow, but it's strategic, because the cloak of blackness doesn't just hide you from the enemy. It can, if not watched, begin to hide you from the light. Witches use this symbolism intentionally. In their rituals, black is used to veil, to mask, to disguise. It is not a color of openness. It is the color of secrets, and when worn with a spirit of heaviness or without prayer, it can act as a spiritual barrier between you and divine exposure. You might not realize it, but your life becomes harder to read spiritually. People sense something closed. You carry a presence that keeps others at bay. That is not coincidental. That is spiritual signaling. And if your soul is already wrestling with fear, depression, confusion, or rejection, black can amplify it by wrapping your struggle in an invisible cover. Witches love that, because now not only are you struggling, you're hidden in your struggle. No one can see the warfare clearly. No one knows what to pray for. You are covered, but not by God. What makes this even more serious is how black often comes into the wardrobe during times of emotional stress, grief, rejection, loneliness, transition. It feels safe, it feels empowering, but oftentimes it is not safety, it's suppression. It's not empowerment, it's protection from vulnerability. People wear black not just to express style, but to hide pain, and witches know the language of pain. They feed off it. They whisper through it. They plant thoughts through it. And when you cover that pain in spiritual darkness, without bringing it into the light of healing, you become accessible. You become spiritually neutralized. You look strong on the outside, but inside you're shrinking. The black is now part of your identity, not just your outfit. And that's exactly what witches want. People who agree with the image of hiding, who will carry that cloak day after day without ever lifting it in prayer. Now again, this is not about fashion condemnation. This is not legalism. This is about discernment. This is about awareness. It's about being spiritually alert enough to ask God, is this just style? Or is there something spiritual behind it? Witches are not more powerful than you. They don't have more authority than a child of God, but they are more intentional, they are more symbolic, they understand the power of representation, and if you don't understand what you're representing when you wear certain things, they'll use your ignorance as permission. They'll call it legal access, and once you've agreed with the cloak, even unknowingly, it takes revelation and prayer to reverse it. So you must be wise, you must walk in knowledge, you must examine what you're putting on, not just externally, but spiritually. Because in this hour nothing is casual anymore. What you wear, what you say, what you listen to, what you carry, it all speaks, it all signals, and if you're not speaking light, you're echoing darkness. That is why witches love when you wear black in ignorance, but when you become aware, when you ask God to uncover every hidden symbolism in your life, then what once cloaked you becomes your testimony. What once covered your pain becomes a story of your deliverance, and what once attracted darkness becomes a declaration of light. There are things that attract attention in the natural world, and then there are things that attract attention in the spirit realm. What may look ordinary to you may be a magnet in the unseen. One of the most overlooked truths in spiritual warfare is this: spirits are drawn to environments, symbols, and frequencies that reflect their nature. And in the case of the color black, witches understand this reality better than most Christians. That's why they are pleased, yes, even delighted, when believers unknowingly clothe themselves in symbols that send spiritual invitations without ever speaking a word. Black is more than a neutral color. It has been a spiritual beacon for ages. In spiritual rituals and ceremonies, especially those involving witchcraft, necromancy, and occultism, black is often used to attract and host specific spirits. These spirits are not passive, they are predatory. They look for places to land, people to influence, and atmospheres to occupy. When witches wear black during rituals, they're not just following tradition. They're aligning with frequencies that open doors to the spirit of death, the spirit of despair, the spirit of fear, the spirit of rebellion, and the spirit of control. And they are very aware that certain garments act as spiritual conductors, pulling these forces into manifestation. Now imagine an unaware believer, someone who is struggling with heaviness, anxiety, or discouragement, constantly dressing in black because it feels safe, stylish, or comfortable. That person may not realize that they are wearing the very color that in spiritual realms is used to call down the very torment they're trying to escape. They may not be participating in any ritual, yet they're wrapped in a garment that welcomes spirits of depression. They walk through their day feeling tired, disconnected, numb, not realizing that the oppression they sense is not entirely psychological. It's spiritual. Something invisible is clinging to their presence. The color, when combined with emotional brokenness and lack of prayer covering, acts as a magnet for what the enemy wants to send, and witches are delighted to see this exchange happen unnoticed. The spirit of death, for example, is not just about physical death. It is the death of purpose, the death of joy, the death of identity. When this spirit comes, it starts draining vitality, hope, vision. People begin to lose interest in things that once brought life. They isolate, they detach, their prayers lose power, their worship loses passion. And yet many of them are walking around dressed in black daily, wrapped in the symbolic energy of funerals and mourning, unable to discern the cycle they are unknowingly participating in. It is a cycle that witches understand very well, and they use it against the uninformed with ease. But it's not just the spirit of death. The spirit of control also rides on this symbolism. Control is a manipulative force. It seeks dominance, silence, and suppression. Black in spiritual rituals is often used to silence voices and shut down spiritual sight. People wearing black for extended seasons often experience increased spiritual dullness. They struggle to hear God clearly. Their dreams become vague or dark. Their inner voice gets clouded. They begin to feel like they're floating through life, unable to connect with clarity. This is not always due to the color alone, but when combined with spiritual ignorance and emotional vulnerability, it sets the stage for darkness to creep in unnoticed. This is especially concerning when you realize how often black is used in our modern culture to symbolize strength, power, and independence. People wear black to look bold. They say things like black is strong, black is confident, black is boss energy. But if you look deeper, much of that association with power is rooted in rebellion. It's not kingdom power, it's a counterfeit, a form of control rooted in pride. In many fashion circles, black is used to give the appearance of dominance and unapproachability. But spiritually, when your appearance projects control, isolation, and invulnerability, you can attract spirits that thrive in those very dynamics. Rebellion, pride, and control travel together. They are kingdom opposites. And witches, who operate under these same spirits, are quick to exploit this in people's lives. What is tragic is that many people, especially women of God, begin to wear black as a way to protect themselves emotionally. It becomes a wall, something that keeps people at a distance, hides pain and masks brokenness. But instead of healing, it reinforces bondage, because anything that isolates you, even in style, can become a doorway to torment. People say, "I feel better in black," but what they're really saying is, "I feel hidden, I feel guarded, I feel unseen." And that posture makes it easier for the enemy to whisper lies in secret. No confrontation, no exposure, just slow, silent agreement with spirits that thrive in loneliness and sorrow. This is why discernment is not optional. This is why you cannot simply go by how something makes you feel. You must go by what it draws spiritually. If the enemy knows he can't stop you through direct attack, he will dress up deception as comfort. He will use color as camouflage. He will wrap bondage in beauty and make it look empowering. He'll say, "Wear this. It's strong, it's sleek, it's powerful," while hiding the fact that what you're really putting on is a garment that attracts spirits of heaviness, despair, and rebellion. And if you're not spiritually awakened, you will wear warfare and call it style. So while witches rejoice that you're wearing their language, you must awaken. You must ask God to give you spiritual insight even in the smallest things, like fabric, color, and mood. Because in the realm of the spirit, there is no such thing as just clothing. Everything speaks, and everything attracts. One of the greatest deceptions in this generation is how the enemy has repackaged darkness and sold it as beauty, elegance, and power. We are living in a time when the very symbols that once represented mourning, mystery, or even evil, are now being glorified as aesthetic, luxurious, and commanding. And leading the charge is the color black. It has been rebranded by the world system, made desirable by culture, endorsed by influencers, stylists, and celebrities, and adopted by millions without question. But behind the fashion and glamour, there is a deeper reality that witches understand very well. What the world calls power, they recognize as partnership. Because they know that black in the spirit realm doesn't just symbolize elegance. It symbolizes agreement, not with the kingdom of light, but with a system of counterfeit power, rooted in rebellion, control, and pride. It's no coincidence that black is now associated with luxury, wealth, sophistication, and dominance. It is used to communicate strength, authority, and superiority. But ask yourself, whose definition of strength? Whose version of authority? Because in the kingdom of God, true power is not found in outer expressions, but in inner submission. It's not in how intimidating you look, it's in how surrendered you live. Yet in today's culture, black is praised because it makes you look untouchable, emotionless, closed off. People wear it to project hardness. They wear it to look like they don't need anyone. They wear it to declare that they are in control. And that's the danger, because that version of control is not holy. It is not godly confidence. It is counterfeit dominion, and it mirrors the very spirit that witches operate in. Witches use black in their rituals not just to invoke spirits, but to symbolize power and self-rule. Black robes, black candles, black circles. They represent personal sovereignty, independence from divine authority, and dominion apart from God. That's why the enemy loves when people clothe themselves in that image. Because they're not just wearing color, they're wearing agreement. They're announcing, even unconsciously, that they operate in a strength that resists vulnerability, submission, and communion. They are taking on a frequency that says, I don't need to be open. I don't need to be known. I don't need the light. And when that posture is adopted, it invites a realm of power that looks strong on the surface, but is spiritually toxic at its core. The spirit realm responds to symbols. God never designed color or design to be arbitrary. In the tabernacle of Moses, everything had symbolic meaning. Color, shape, material. Blue, purple, scarlet, they had divine purposes. Now fast forward to today, and we've stripped meaning from the things we wear. But witches haven't. They know the language of appearance. They understand that when someone wears black with no discernment, they are more susceptible to the frequency of dominance, manipulation, and isolation. That's why black is used in fashion campaigns to give a woman the appearance of sensual power, or to make a man appear untouchable and cold. It's deliberate, it's psychological, but more than that, it's spiritual. Wearing black to feel powerful often signals a deeper void, a powerlessness within. Many people clothe themselves in dark tones to overcompensate for emotional pain, fear, insecurity, or trauma. The black becomes armor. It becomes a wall, but it's not God's armor. It's not the armor of light that Paul wrote about. It's a shell forged in pain, worn to keep people out and keep wounds in. And while it may look strong, it actually becomes a prison. You stop feeling, you stop connecting, you stop opening up. The power that black appears to give is a lie. Is power without peace, boldness without joy, independence without intimacy. And witches are thrilled when people buy into that lie. Because now they don't have to cast spells. You've already cast one over yourself. You've come into alignment with a posture that resists healing and invites pride. That false power is the same thing Lucifer carried when he said, I will ascend, I will be like the Most High. It's the spirit of elevation without consecration. It's the pursuit of influence without submission. It's the appearance of strength without the substance of surrender. And so many today are dressing in black thinking they are becoming stronger, when in fact they are spiritually aligning themselves with the very spirit that was cast down from heaven. That's why it's not just a matter of color, it's a matter of covenant. Who are you in agreement with when you dress? What spirit are you activating when you clothe yourself? Are you putting on the image of holiness or the appearance of hardness? You see, the danger is not in black itself. The danger is in the unspoken agreement that often comes with it. When it becomes your identity, your daily covering, your go-to wardrobe. Even in seasons where God is calling you into joy, light, and vulnerability, you are resisting the Spirit's work in your life. That's not fashion, that's spiritual warfare, and witches love it because now the warfare is internal. They don't have to send curses when you're already dressing in agreement with one. They don't have to invoke spirits when your outer man already reflects a rebellion against healing. You begin to look like what you're fighting, and slowly you stop fighting it. This is why spiritual awareness is critical in every area of life. You can't just go with trends. You can't just wear what makes you feel powerful. You must wear what aligns with the Spirit of God. Because when your image becomes a message and your presence becomes a sound in the Spirit, you will either reflect the kingdom of light or echo the rebellion of darkness. And the enemy doesn't care how beautiful you look wearing it. As long as you're deceived by the power it seems to give, he's already won. There is something the enemy understands about atmosphere that many believers overlook. He knows that everything carries a vibration, and every vibration opens a door. Environments are not just physical. They're spiritual climates shaped by the sounds, words, objects, and yes, even the colors that surround us. This is why witches are so strategic. They don't just do rituals, they create environments. They don't just cast spells. They curate atmospheres that welcome the demonic. And one of the tools they use frequently is black. Not only for their garments, but for candles, veils, altars, and walls. Black is their canvas because it absorbs everything. It hides what is present and invites what is absent. It's not just symbolic darkness. It becomes a spiritual void that begs to be filled. And when you wear it constantly, especially without spiritual discernment, you become part of that atmosphere. You are not just wearing darkness, you are hosting it. You must understand how dangerous that is, because spirits move on invitation, and invitation doesn't always come through words. It comes through posture, alignment, vibration, and spiritual agreement. When your entire environment, from your clothes to your home to your emotional state, begins to reflect darkness, even passively, you are no longer resisting the enemy. You are accommodating him, and accommodation becomes occupation. What starts as fashion, as personal preference, as this is just my style, slowly turns into spiritual lethargy, heaviness, oppression, and distance from the presence of God. Not because black is cursed, but because it has become the banner over your atmosphere. And banners matter. God is known by his banners. Jehovah Nissi means the Lord is my banner. The enemy copies that system. He also marks territory through banners, symbols, and cloaks. So when your wardrobe becomes a banner of darkness, knowingly or unknowingly, you are giving spiritual clearance for the enemy to linger. Witches love when believers wear black for this reason, because it gives them an edge in the spirit without having to do warfare. They know that if a person has unknowingly wrapped themselves in the same symbolic code they use in rituals, then that person is more spiritually compatible with the energy that witches release. They can send confusion, depression, disconnection, or even seduction into your environment, and it finds no resistance because the atmosphere is already dressed for it. It's like a virus looking for a matching host, and black is often that match. When your home is dark, your wardrobe is dark, your conversations are heavy, your mindset is weighed down, and your prayer life is faint, the enemy doesn't have to push hard. He just whispers, and it echoes. This is why many people who constantly wear black go through seasons of deep isolation, mental fog, emotional withdrawal, or apathy in worship. They start saying things like, I feel numb, I don't feel God, I don't want to be around people, or I'm not motivated anymore. These aren't just emotional waves. These are signs of spiritual fog setting in. And the fog has a source. It's not only what you're going through emotionally, it's what your environment is inviting. Your spiritual climate has been compromised by your physical choices. You're dressing for protection, but receiving pressure. You think you're being discreet, but you're being devoured slowly, and witches don't have to launch full scale attacks when you're already weakened by your own agreement with the darkness around you. Now someone might ask, are you saying the color black is evil? No, but in the spirit realm, intent without insight is still an open door. It's not about being afraid of color, it's about being aware of covenant. Witches wear black with full understanding. They don't just wear it, they activate it. And when you, a child of light, adopt their symbols without activating the covering of Christ, you create a conflict in your spiritual atmosphere. You can't walk in divine authority while cloaked in a pattern that symbolizes rebellion, death, and silence in the kingdom of darkness. That's why many believers feel spiritually confused. Their hearts want light, but their environments signal darkness. Their mouths declare faith, but their wardrobe whispers fear, shame, or secrecy. Witches depend on this confusion. It is their open door. They know that the more blended the lines become between holy and unholy, light and dark, sacred and stylish, the easier it is to influence people from the background. They don't need to appear with chants and candles. All they need is for a believer to stop discerning, to stop asking the Holy Spirit, should I be wearing this? What is this inviting into my life? Is this just fashion, or is it spiritual? Once that question is silenced, the door is cracked. And demons don't knock. They enter, and so the real danger is not in the black cloth itself. It is in the numbness it creates. When you wear it long enough, you stop noticing what it attracts. You stop feeling the atmosphere shift. You stop sensing what's wrong. You lose your spiritual edge. You become a person who is slowly muted. Emotionally, spiritually, relationally. That's why witches love it, because a silenced believer is a neutralized threat. A believer who's too stylish to discern, too numb to pray, too withdrawn to resist. That's a target already subdued. No warfare needed. That's why we must awaken. Not to fear symbols, but to interrogate them. To ask hard questions about what we've made normal. To go before God and say, if this is creating an atmosphere that attracts anything but you, strip it from me. Change my wardrobe, change my environment, change my vibration. Because the only atmosphere that should clothe your life is one that the Holy Spirit can dwell in freely, not with hesitation, not with competition, not with conflict, but freely. That is the atmosphere of deliverance. That is the fragrance of holiness. That is the sound of true power. There is a reason why witches use colors deliberately in their rituals, and black remains the most consistent among them. Not because it is simply dark, but because it conceals. The demonic always thrives in concealment. That is the strategy of darkness, to cover, to confuse, and to camouflage. And when you clothe yourself in black repeatedly, you are unknowingly participating in a spiritual principle. You are agreeing with concealment in the spirit realm. You are saying without words, I do not want to be seen. I do not want to be exposed. I do not want to be read. I do not want to be vulnerable. And that posture becomes a welcome mat for spirits of hiding. Spirits that pull you away from transparency, accountability, and clarity. Witches love that posture because it aligns perfectly with the cloaking needed to trap a soul in deception. When a believer enters that mode of concealment, they become resistant to confrontation and allergic to light. They say they want deliverance, but they avoid the spaces where truth is preached. They say they want freedom, but they draw back when true prophets speak. They claim to be seeking God, but they constantly retreat when light begins to shine on their hidden wounds, their secret sins, and their buried trauma. This is not always rebellion. It is often the result of a spiritual atmosphere that has conditioned them to shrink back. And black becomes the external mirror of that internal resistance. It isn't just an outfit anymore. It becomes a language of guardedness, a language of silence, a language of darkness. And the kingdom of darkness knows its own language. Witches recognize that the more a person hides, the more control they can gain over that person's soul. Because what you conceal cannot be healed, and what you refuse to expose becomes territory for torment. Many people don't understand that the enemy doesn't just want you to sin. He wants you to stay silent about it. He wants you to dress it, defend it, and decorate it so that it looks normal. Black becomes the aesthetic of secrecy. You look composed on the outside, but inside you're battling shadows. You smile, but you're slipping. You function, but you're fading. And yet, every day, you clothe yourself in something that spiritually agrees with what's killing you. That's not just wardrobe. That's spiritual warfare disguised as style. The enemy's goal is to normalize spiritual covering that blocks the light. And for many, black has become that covering. It's no longer a choice. It's a cloak. It is chosen in times of spiritual disconnection, emotional pain, or seasons where they don't want to be asked questions. When a person is healing, they are drawn to warmth, to light, to vibrancy. But when a person is retreating, broken, or under oppression, they unconsciously reach for the garments that match their soul. That's when black becomes the daily choice. And that is where witches find satisfaction, because you've internalized the very appearance they use to conjure spirits of control, heaviness, and bondage. The power of this revelation is not just in the symbolism, but in the pattern. Patterns speak louder than moments. If someone wears black once, that may mean nothing, but if it becomes the default, the comfort zone, the safe space, the daily armor, then you must ask, what part of me is trying to hide? Because what starts as fashion can become agreement. And agreements in the spirit realm open doors. That's what witches rely on, unconscious agreement. They don't need your spoken permission if your life posture already welcomes what they serve. And when the saints wear the same garments used in spells, rituals, and death rites, it sends a signal that you are spiritually unguarded and emotionally vulnerable. That's why many witches study fashion, aesthetics, and mood. They understand that if they can influence how people dress, they can influence how people think. They know that garments are more than fabric. They are symbols of identity, and black, in their system, represents death, rebellion, secrecy, and inner torment. So if they can get an entire generation to equate black with confidence, edge, power, or mystery, then they have successfully rebranded darkness as desirable, and many have bought into it without ever questioning the spirit behind it. What once was a warning is now a trend. What once was a veil of mourning has become the mark of high fashion. But the spirit behind it has not changed. It still hides, it still kills, and it still silences. There are people who once burned for God, who once heard his voice clearly, who once moved in prophetic sensitivity, but now feel distant, unclear, and muted, and they don't know why. They've changed nothing about their faith. They still go to church, still serve, still pray, but their atmosphere has changed. Their garments have changed. Their inner tone has shifted. Slowly, their light has been covered, not extinguished, but dulled. And one of the coverings used was black, not because it's inherently evil, but because in their emotional vulnerability it became a shield, and what was meant to protect now isolates. What was meant to feel safe now invites sorrow. What was once a personal choice has become a spiritual prison. Witches love this process because it doesn't require confrontation. It's quiet warfare, it's influence through symbolism, it's manipulation through mood. They don't need to curse you when your agreement is already dressing you daily. They just wait for the right season of emotional breakdown, the right betrayal, the right heartbreak, the right disappointment, and then they whisper, cover yourself, hide, pull back, go dark. And if you're not discerning, you'll obey. You'll wear black and call it healing, but in the spirit, it's bondage disguised as self-preservation. But when you begin to awaken, when you begin to ask God to expose every agreement, spoken or unspoken, you will see clearly again. You will realize that some of what you wore was not clothing. It was a cloak of confusion, fear, silence, and shame. And when you lay it down, the atmosphere changes, because freedom always follows exposure. And healing always follows light. The enemy has always known that if he can distort what is symbolic, he can confuse what is sacred. Witches are not simply casting spells. They are reprogramming meanings. They are hijacking symbols God created to point to identity and covenant, and they are weaponizing them against unsuspecting believers. And one of their most successful tactics has been redefining color, particularly black. What was once a practical tone has been redesigned as a statement of power, rebellion, or self-protection, and this is not accidental. It is strategic. Because if the enemy can get you to adopt his meanings, you will unknowingly adopt his mindset. That's why witches rejoice when believers wear black with no spiritual awareness. Because the agreement isn't just with the color, it's with the culture attached to it. It is not the fabric that concerns the spirit realm. It is the message the fabric carries. And in the language of darkness, black speaks volumes. It declares isolation, It whispers silence. It conceals wounds. It camouflages sin. It draws attention while rejecting intimacy, and over time it becomes a cloak of contradiction. You want to be known, but you're hiding. You want deliverance, but you're guarded. You want to feel God, but you're disconnected. And the longer you remain in that contradiction, the more permission darkness has to linger in your atmosphere. Because contradiction in the spirit creates confusion, and confusion creates access, not access to truth, access to manipulation, access to voices that don't come from heaven. And witches wait for that exact moment, when clarity is dim, identity is uncertain, and a person becomes vulnerable to whispers that sound spiritual, but are laced with deception. Many people don't realize that the color black is used in witchcraft not only because of what it hides, but because of what it holds. It absorbs energy. It traps light. It silences movement. In the natural, black objects absorb more heat and light than any other color. In the spirit, it absorbs emotional weight. This is why people often feel heavier, moodier, more withdrawn, or disconnected when they constantly wear black during spiritual warfare. It is not always fashion. It is often warfare manifesting in your appearance. You start feeling sluggish, you stop hearing clearly, you pull back from your calling, and slowly your outer garments begin to match the war happening in your inner world. You start to dress like defeat even when you're still claiming victory. And that inconsistency opens the door for spiritual weariness. Witches love that door because tired believers are easily tricked. The kingdom of darkness is not always bold and loud. It's subtle, stylish, and strategic. It doesn't attack through monsters. It moves through moods. It whispers through playlists. It infiltrates through fashion. It moves into atmospheres through aesthetic alignment. It's not concerned with how spiritual you sound. It's watching what you unconsciously agree with. You say you're filled with light, but you're cloaked in sorrow. You declare freedom, but your appearance shouts bondage. And that is the crack that witches need. That is how familiar spirits gain access, through internal permission cloaked in external confusion. You don't need to say, "Come in." All you need to do is agree with their frequency, and your atmosphere will shift to match it. There are people who walk into a room and heaviness follows them. Not because they're bad, not because they're demon possessed, but because they've unknowingly dressed themselves in sorrow and wear it like a shield. They think they're protecting themselves, but they're attracting oppression. Their clothes become a spiritual billboard announcing spiritual fatigue, emotional woundedness, and unresolved trauma. And witches don't need full access to destroy. They just need agreement to linger. They wait for you to keep dressing in darkness long enough that your discernment becomes dull. You no longer recognize what's off. You no longer feel the need to pray. You no longer crave the word. You just exist in numbness. And that numbness is where the real spiritual danger lies. It's not the big sins that destroy most believers. It's the quiet erosion of their awareness. It's the small agreements, the unchecked compromises. The style choices never brought before God. The music that carries a spirit but feels relatable. The clothes that match pain but look cool. The home decor that honors cultures of death, rebellion, or perversion but is labeled modern. These are not just aesthetic decisions. They are silent partnerships, and witches understand that whoever controls the atmosphere controls the outcomes. They don't need to drag you into a dark room. They just need to get you to carry that room with you wherever you go. When a believer wears black as an expression of unresolved grief, deep depression, rebellion, or withdrawal, they may not even realize that they are prophesying through their appearance. Your appearance is your first sermon. Before you open your mouth, your spirit is already communicating something. And if your appearance is rooted in hidden pain or silent rebellion, then your life begins to echo what your garments declare. You may say, "I'm fine," but your atmosphere says otherwise, and witches are sensitive to that language. They know when to send emotional torment, intrusive thoughts, lustful distractions, or religious confusion. Not because they're so powerful, but because the atmosphere has been cleared by your agreements. This is not about fear, it's about freedom. Because once you wake up to the warfare around you, you stop dressing like your wounds. You stop partnering with symbols of sorrow and start clothing yourself with garments of praise. You start wearing colors that reflect the joy, light, and boldness of the kingdom. You begin to resist the pull of death, the tone of secrecy, and the style of sorrow. And in doing so, you close the door, you break the frequency, you disrupt the atmosphere which is depend on, and suddenly your appearance no longer matches their rituals. It declares their defeat. So now you must ask yourself, what agreements have I made in silence? What have I worn without wisdom? What atmospheres have I unknowingly invited through the garments I've chosen? Because this is not about fashion, it's about frequency, not about fabric, it's about alignment. The kingdom of God is calling for a generation that no longer hides behind style, but stands boldly in truth. A people who dress not for the approval of culture, but for the assignment of the Spirit. A people who understand that everything speaks, including what you wear. This is your moment to renounce what you didn't realize you had agreed with. This is your time to strip off every cloak of sorrow, every layer of rebellion, every silent garment of depression that has covered your identity. You are not called to walk around in darkness pretending it's empowerment. You are called to shine, called to be seen, called to radiate the glory of the one who brought you out of shadows and into marvelous light. And when you make that shift, when you clothe yourself in light, in joy, in truth, the enemy loses his camouflage, the witches lose their advantage, the spiritual fog begins to lift, and your life begins to preach louder than your words ever could. Because you're no longer just wearing clothes, you're wearing covenant, you're not just dressing your body, you're declaring your authority. Let the veil be lifted, let the cloaks be burned, let the garments of deception be exchanged for robes of righteousness. And let this be the day you no longer wear what the enemy celebrates, but what heaven recognizes. Because when your wardrobe reflects your warfare, your breakthrough becomes unstoppable.